So there is this very powerful book by Malcom Gladwell, David and Goliath, that came out sometime around 2011, 2012, somewhere thereabout. And in this book, Malcom Gladwell retells the biblical story of David and Goliath, except that he points out something rather astounding from the story, which is the fact that David wasn't quite the underdog in the story, as we attempted to believe from the Bible version. So in effect, this book points out what advantages David had in the fight against Goliath, and at the same time lays out what strategies one could possibly apply when faced with a giant. Actually, the full title of the book is David and Goliath, How to Defeat Giants. And so the author Malcom Gladwell brilliantly points out exactly how David could bring down the giant, what strategies he applied. And among so many other things, there are 2 points I remember from that story. One, David changed the rules of the game. Unilaterally, you would say, in real time, he changed the rules of the game by bringing a slingshot to the fight when everyone expected him to come fight face to face, as was the tradition. That's one. And two, Goliath's rather humongous size was both of an advantage and a disadvantage to him, because the author is able to point out that Goliath's physical physique was nothing but a physical manifestation of an underlying disease, of an underlying illness. And so he points out quite a couple of things that could be possibly wrong with Goliath's health, among which is the fact that he was visually impaired. He couldn't see quite well. And so all through his fighting career, you could say, Goliath was accustomed to a specific style of fighting, which of course was basically a man-to-man physical combat. And so as well expected, Goliath being a giant would basically just crush his opponents once he got grasp of them, until David came along and changed the rules of the game, got Goliath off balance, and walked out the victor of the fight. Now, sometimes last year, the French public was taken aback by a scandal that had to do with the French presidential couple, as some journalists postulated the idea that the French First Lady, Brigitte Macron, was actually a trans woman. In other words, that she had been born a male and at some point in time transitioned to a female that she now is. And so this was quite a thing in France, to the point where even the French president had to say a few words about it. At some point in time, he kind of died a natural death, and people just moved on with their lives and kind of forgot about it, if you will. But it turns out that American independent journalist Candace Owens didn't quite move on from the story, as she apparently took on a journey of investigative journalism herself to what has now led to a series of hers on YouTube, where she buttresses on the point that the French First Lady was actually born a male. Now, I got to make this disclaimer right here and now. I do not give a rat's rear about the details of the story. I couldn't care less about who someone decided to get married to. You could be married to a tree or the stars, I don't care. But as I watched the first 2 episodes of a series on YouTube, which is called Becoming Brigitte, first, I had mixed feelings. On the one hand, I admired her courage and the depth of research she must have done. But on the other hand, I honestly felt scared for her, because this lady, Candace Owens, is actually going after some of the most powerful people in the world. I mean, people so powerful who by a mere stroke of their pen, people fight and die. People go to war and die in their thousands. That's how powerful these people are. That's how powerful the French president is. And so, to see this lady, this independent journalist, Candace Owens, put up a fight with these people could be very scary. However, as I watched, I couldn't help but realize something, which is that Candace in this fight, and I call it a fight because her legal team has been having a back and forth with the Macron's legal team based in the States. And like I said, I couldn't help but realize that Candace, either by default or by design, whether she's aware of this or not, is applying one of David's strategies in the fight against Goliath, which is that she keeps changing the rules of the game mid-fight. And I'm going to give you a few examples. So, there have been situations where The Macron's legal team would want to have somewhat of a private interaction with Candace, and she would immediately take it to YouTube, to the public, if you would. And that, of course, kicks the other side off the balance. First, you had the Macron's legal team kind of bombard her with a series of questions where you could tell they wanted her to address a couple of allegations she had made, all right? And Candace, instead of addressing this, would simply refer to them as banal and would rather put forth her own questions. And so her legal team came up with a set of questions of their own, 21 questions in number, which she claims make up for the elephant in the room. And she put it in front of them and be like, you know what? Answer these questions. I consider your questions to be frivolous. Here are my own 21 questions. If you can provide satisfactory answers to my questions, then we're good, and I'm dropping this whole thing. And it turns out that Macron's legal team has been unable to respond to any of those questions. Now, in one other instance, the Macron's legal team sent her legal team a mail, and you could tell that the Macron's legal team wanted it to be treated as private as possible. But this lady took it to the media the very next day or so. Now, by bringing all these interactions to light, this lady has made her situation known to the public. And so anyone would want to have a second thought of maybe harming her in some way, because then they would understand that people have got their eyes on them. You know what I'm saying? They would understand that people are now watchers of whatever is going on. I think they wanted her to be somewhere in a corridor where they could frighten her with stories of ghosts. But she decided to come to the light. And now it's hard to do that. She's brought the fight to the public, and everyone is aware of the stakes at hand. And this alone, in my opinion, is good enough to let her opponent, in this case the Macron's legal team, to be a little bit more cautious when dealing with her. Plus, in some cases even, you would see Candace repeatedly calling on the Macron's legal team to sue her to court in America, rather than try to scare her with mails. So it brings us to this. How is it going to end? We don't know. But what we do know at this point is that she's been applying some really good strategies when fighting, especially with a much bigger opponent. As detailed in Malcom Gladwell's book, David and Goliath, How to Defeat Giants. And so, the takeaway should be that whenever you fight a giant or whatever opponent who is relatively bigger than you, always remember to change the rules. Never play by their rules. If you change the rules, at least stand a chance of living to tell the tale some other day.